All right. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the Special Committee on Government Records Retention. Today is Tuesday, November 25th. My name is Michelle Beaton. I am the chair of the committee, and I'd like to welcome the members in attendance with Gord McNeely, Peter Bevan Baker, and Corey Deagle. And so I would like to call the meeting to order and ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. With Corey Deagle. Members, I'd just like to remind everyone, last meeting we had on our agenda items 4, 5, and 6, which are the review of correspondence, review of scheduling, and new business. And because we went in camera to review some sensitive information from the witness that we had at the time, we did not come back into public. So I just wanted to recognize that the committee agreed that we would defer those 3 items to today's agenda. So that is why on the agenda it's listed as deferred from November 20th. So we will cover off those items once we get to section 4, item 4 on the agenda. And is everyone okay with that?
Yes, that's true.
Great, thank you very much. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests today, and I appreciate the wait and you being patient with us this morning while we get everything set up. So today we're having a briefing on federal government records management and best practices, and this is via video conference. And we're fortunate today to have representatives from the Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada. We have Sonya Reid. She's the Assistant Secretary, Digital Policy and Services, and Sonya will be doing the presentation today. And supporting her is Robert Trottier, Executive Director, Digital Policy Division, as well as Dara Price from Library and Archives Canada. She's the Director General of the Archives Branch. So I would, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you all for being here with us today. We look forward to your presentation. And without further ado, Sonya, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Can everybody hear me, I hope? And thank you and good morning, Madam Chair and honorable committee members. And we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about information management in the Government of Canada. And thank you as well for that kind introduction. So today I'm going to provide some general context on the legislative and policy framework for information management in the Government of Canada. I'll provide an overview of the best practices and guidance that we provide to Government of Canada institutions and some of the challenges and opportunities moving forward in respect of information management. The information management administrative policy requirements for departments and agencies across the Government of Canada are established by Treasury Board and set out in the Policy and Directive on Service and Digital, which came into effect on April 1st, 2020. These policies are established pursuant to the Financial Administration Act. The policy instruments, particularly the Policy and Directive on Service and Digital, represent an integrated set of rules for the management of information and data, information technology, service, and cybersecurity, and they replace the former policies on IM, IT, and service. The administrative policy requirements align with and support legal obligations set out in various acts, most notably the Access to Information Act, the Privacy Act, the Library and Archives of Canada Act, the Canada Evidence Act, and the Security of Information Act. Information and data in the Government of Canada are recognized in the Policy on Service and Digital as strategic assets that play a central role in supporting departmental operations, decision-making, and the design and delivery of services to individuals and business. Information and data also underpin various legal obligations, such as privacy requirements and the public's right of access to government information. As you know, the Government of Canada, as with all governments, collects, uses, and manages a significant amount of information and data. And as the steward of this information, it is the Government of Canada's duty to ensure the important asset throughout its life cycle. For information and data to be effectively leveraged for any purpose, they must first be well managed. This supports the expected outcomes of the Policy on Service and Digital, that information is managed as a strategic asset throughout its life and is increasingly interoperable to enable reuse as well as openness and transparency while respecting privacy and security requirements. Current IM policy requirements in the Government of Canada are focused on ensuring that information and data management initiatives are in line with business objectives of the individual departments, as well as legal obligations and the values and expectations of Canadians. As well as putting in place the tools and systems needed to manage information and data effectively throughout their life cycle. It is expected that Government of Canada institutions know what information and data they have and understand their value in order to manage it effectively and use it to support their operations, service delivery, and effective decision-making. Open data and information is also integrated within the policy on service and digital as part of sound information management and data management practices. I'll speak a little bit now about the key roles and responsibilities for information in the Government of Canada from a departmental perspective. So within the Government of Canada, information management is a shared responsibility across a number of departments. Treasury Board Secretariat is responsible for developing information management administrative policy instruments and supporting policy implementation in departments through the provision of guidance, tools, and advice. TBS also plays an oversight and compliance role through regular exercise like TB submission reviews and the Management Accountability Framework, which I'll discuss a little bit further. Lastly, TBS also supports information management workforce capacity and capability through the development of IM-specific work descriptions and competencies. Library and Archives Canada is responsible for acquiring, preserving, promoting, and facilitating access to the documentary heritage of Canada. LAC also issues records disposition authorizations and provides advice and guidance on record keeping and IM to departments, and I'll speak more to their role momentarily. Other departments include Shared Services Canada, which is responsible for certain services related to email, data centers, networks, and end-user technology devices. Public Services and Procurement, which is responsible for procuring and providing common enterprise solutions and services related to electronic document and records management systems. And the Canada School of the Public Service, responsible for developing and delivering government-wide core information management learning programs for all public servants. And I'm going to speak a little bit now in terms of the requirements under the policy on service for information management. So within departments, there are various responsibilities for IM, and these are assigned to deputy heads, the chief information officer within individual departments, and other designated officials as required, as well as employees, with the ultimate accountability, of course, resting with the deputy head of the department. Deputy heads of department are responsible for ensuring that information and data are managed as a strategic asset, ensuring that departmental responsibilities and accountabilities for information and data management are clearly defined, ensuring that requirements in respect of privacy and security are met, and maximizing the release of open data and information through open.canada.ca. Deputy heads are also responsible for ensuring that departmental decisions and decision-making processes are documented. This last is supported by a requirement in the Directive on Service and Digital instructing employees to document their decisions and activities of business value. Information has business value if it enables or documents decision-making in support of programs, services, and operations, or supports departmental reporting, performance, and accountability requirements. Examples include briefing notes, records of discussion, decisions, corporate plans, and reports and memoranda. Determination of business value is based on the content of the information, not the container. So this means that information that's contained in email and chat messages could be of business value. Although for the majority of public servants, most emails and chat messages tend to be transitory. Information is transitory if it's only required for a limited time to ensure the completion of a routine action or the preparation of a subsequent record. Examples could include convenience copies of records, early drafts of documents, chat exchanges between colleagues, and email messages that don't convey decisions. In addition to the deputy head and employee responsibilities around the duty to document, departmental chief information officers are responsible for working with program and business owners to identify what information has business value in their organization in light of legal, policy, and program requirements. CIOs are also responsible for establishing designated corporate repositories in which to manage information throughout its life cycle. They're responsible for establishing retention periods based on business value determinations and in accordance with the Library and Archives Canada Act, carrying out disposition activities for departmental information and data, and protecting the information and data within the control of the institution, and doing all of this in accordance with its security classification. Critically, Chief Information Officers must also ensure that digital systems are the preferred means of creating, capturing, and managing information within their departments. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and speak a little bit to the role of Library and Archives Canada, as this heavily impacts the requirements and processes around retention and disposition within departments. In accordance with the Library and Archives of Canada Act, no government or ministerial record can be disposed of or destroyed without the written consent of the Librarian and Archivist of Canada. This consent is provided through disposition authorizations, some of which may be for many institutions. For example, there are multi-institutional disposition authorizations that authorize the disposal of transitory information, and some of which are unique to each department. So there may be individual disposition authorizations that are specific to a department. To guide departments in the identification of information of business value and the establishment of retention schedules, Library and Archives Canada has developed a generic valuation tool that describes common business activities across government, identifies information of business value related to those activities, and recommends retention specifications for that information. So this would be one of the tools that a CIO would use in developing the retention periods in accordance with the Library and Archives of Canada Act. It is important to note that as a National Library and Archives, LAC focuses on, identifies, and acquires documentary heritage of national significance. Documentary heritage of national significance is that which demonstrates the Canadian experience, federal or pan-Canadian, has influenced the development of Canada, has broad national scope, has or has had an impact on national trends and events, or illustrates Canadian impact and perspectives on international trends and events. LAC draws on a macro appraisal methodology to identify records of historical or archival value for institutions subject to the LAC Act, emphasizing the context of records creation over content. Under macro appraisal, analysis is carried out to understand the role of the records creator within society and the Government of Canada, its relationship to other government institutions and citizens, and its mandate and activities over time. LAC's Government Archives Division employs specialized archivists who are portfolioed to different government departments, and the archivists engage regularly with their departments to support the transfer of their archival records to LAC. In addition to government records, LAC also requires the records from completed Government of Canada task forces, commissions of inquiry, and royal commissions. And I'm certain that my colleague, Dara Price from the LAC, would be happy at the end to entertain any questions you may have on disposition, archiving, and long-term preservations, as this is her core area of responsibility. So I'm going to speak a little bit now to how we provide guidance and advice to departments. TBS and the LAC work together to develop and deliver information management guidance to all public servants through various internal communication tools to support them in meeting their policy requirements and legal obligations. We've established the Government of Canada Digital Standards in 2018, which exhorts employees and decision makers to act as good data stewards and to work in the open, and just recently published the Guideline on Service and Digital that is available on the Government of Canada website, canada.ca. The Guideline on Service and Digital presents considerations for the strategic management of information and data in support of the policy. In addition, the Guideline for Employees of the Government of Canada Information Management Basics is a comprehensive resource that outlines key information management concepts and practices and how to apply them effectively in a variety of situations. Departments and employees can also benefit from an online information management toolkit, which provides employees with central access to practical information management tips and resources. Departments and employees are encouraged to engage with TBS and others in the information management community through forums on GC Connects, which is an internal forum for Government of Canada employees, as well as GC Collab, which enables collaboration outside of the Government of Canada and internal to the Government of Canada at the same time. Here they can find up-to-date resources and discussion forums on a variety of topics related to IM and the policy on service and digital. We also work closely with LAC to provide government transition guidance as it relates to information in ministers' offices. Finally, in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and with the move to remote work, TBS released targeted guidance reminding employees of their duties to document business value decisions and activities and to manage and secure the information that they work with in accordance with policies and guidelines. Employees working remotely must apply the same IM policies and practices as those working in the office, and this includes ensuring that their decisions or that documents of business value are saved in the appropriate corporate repository. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the government-wide information management tools that we leverage. So the Government of Canada has established a number of standards and standardized tools to enable the management of electronic information. We put in place a standard for electronic documents and records management solutions, or EDRMS. EDRMS are automated systems used to manage, protect, and preserve information from creation to disposition. These systems maintain appropriate contextual information, or metadata, and enable organizations to access, use, and dispose of records in a managed, systematic, and auditable way in order to ensure accountability and transparency and to meet departmental business objectives. GC Docs, as it is referred to, is the Government of Canada version of Open Text Content Server and was endorsed as the enterprise standard for EDRMS by the Government of Canada Enterprise Architecture Review Board in May 2018. As of November 2020, 83 organizations in the Government of Canada have adopted GC Docs as a formal corporate repository as required by the Policy on Service and Digital. In addition to GC Docs, the Government of Canada has invested in the Microsoft 365 platform to support collaboration and communication across the Government of Canada. In response to the shift to remote work as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the deployment of Microsoft 365 across the Government of Canada was rapidly accelerated. This tool has been quickly adopted for collaboration, communication, and information creation and sharing, driven by the needs for tools and platforms that connect people across distances. TBS is working actively with enterprise information management partners to develop and deliver additional information management guidance around the use of M365. Beyond their day-to-day operations, there are various instances when government institutions are obligated to search for and produce information. Two notable examples of this are the litigation discovery process, as well as requests under the Access to Information and the Privacy Act. In these and other cases, institutions must identify, preserve, and collect all information relevant to the request. The obligation to disclose and produce records extends to all information, regardless of format, for example, whether it's electronic or paper, whether they are considered information of business value or transitory information, regardless of where they are and regardless of where they are stored. So having standardized and rigorous information management practices ensure that when requests for information arise, departments are able to identify, preserve, and collect relevant information in a way that is thorough, timely, and cost-effective, and that minimizes disruptions to operations. Working with departments, TBS has produced guidance and communications for departments to assist them in meeting their obligations pursuant to these legal requirements. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about monitoring and oversight in terms of how we oversee the requirements of the policy. So the primary mechanism for oversight is the Management Accountability Framework. This is an annual oversight exercise led by Treasury Board Secretariat that assesses departmental management practices and performance across several management domains. Information management has long been included as an area of management and is historically assessed in conjunction with IT and more recently service. TBS also exercises an information management oversight role in terms of reviewing Treasury Board submissions and other key planning documents to ensure they are aligned with Government of Canada information management policy requirements and strategic direction. In addition, LAC monitors transfers of archival records by government departments subject to the LAC Act, ensuring that a continuous chain of custody is documented. Once transferred to LAC, historical records of the Government of Canada are made discoverable to the Canadian public via LAC's online catalogue of holdings. So looking ahead in terms of challenges and opportunities, we know that the volume of information and data produced across governments is increasing exponentially with each passing day. Traditional analog methods of record keeping, we already know, are insufficient to support the management of information and data as a strategic organizational asset that underpins digital transformation and supports evidence-based decision-making, service delivery, operations, and open and transparent government. We know that there are many recent advances in digital tools and technologies, such as artificial intelligence and automation and blockchain, which provide opportunities for transforming and modernizing information management. These tools, supported by proper information management practices, present opportunities to support increased open data, as well as more open by default approaches to government information. And so part of what the Government of Canada is doing in an ongoing fashion is looking at how we can leverage these tools to better improve our information management practices and to make things easier for employees. Like many organizations, the Government of Canada continues to be challenged in respect of information management. The documentation of decisions and ensuring that these records are stored in the official system of record or corporate repository for a department rest for the most part with individual employees. The exponential growth in information in respect of emails and the use of other communication tools can make it difficult for employees to ensure that they are effectively managing the information they produce on a day-to-day basis. The work to adapt information management to the needs of the digital age is ongoing. We recognize the need to increasingly leverage digital tools and technologies to automate and digitize manual information processes as much as possible to reduce the burden on individual employees by making it easier for them to meet their obligations. We need to take the guesswork out of doing information management for the average employee, while also making it easier for information management specialists and information and data experts to perform rigorous lifecycle management, as well as other compliance, security, and governance functions behind the scenes. To this end, TBS is currently considering how our own administrative policies and guidance can continually be improved to support better information management in the Government of Canada. As part of this effort, we are reviewing and updating all of our information management policy instruments from the former Policy on Information Management, including standards on email management and the standard on electronic documents and records management solutions, as well as identifying areas where new information management policy requirements may be needed to ensure that we have the right requirements in place for managing information in the digital age. So in short, you cannot say that information management is where you've done it once and you're done. It is a continuing and ongoing process of improvement in terms of how you are continually evolving your information management practices. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to speak with you today. My colleagues and I are happy to address any questions or comments you may have.
Perfect, and thank you. Oh, am I going to get that feedback? There we go. Sorry, we got a little bit of feedback here in the chamber, but it's gone. Thank you for that, Sonya. That was a presentation that was full of detail and very helpful, especially going through the challenges and opportunities that we could look at. So I appreciate you being so thorough, and I will open it up for questions from our members at this point. Peter Bevan-Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I too would like to thank you, Sonya, for that very comprehensive and detailed presentation. A few things I'd like to pick up on. You used the term business value, which is not something I think I have heard in any of our discussions in this committee, but it appears that relates to the importance of records when it comes to making a decision or advice to governments or guidance or things like that. And I'm wondering, you mentioned, and I may have this name wrong, it passed quickly, but a generic valuation tool that you provide to public bodies and departments in order that they can evaluate whether a particular record does indeed have business value. And I'm wondering whether that is something that's public and available online.
So the generic tool is actually through the Library and Archives Canada. So I'll turn over to Dara actually to explain a little bit about that tool and provide some more information.
Thanks, Sonya. And thank you also to the committee. I echo Sonya's sentiments to thank you for having us to speak today. So to your question about generic valuation tools, the short answer is yes, they are available online, and I'd be happy to forward that information to the committee after this presentation. And just to sort of reiterate what Sonya said in her presentation, the generic valuation tools are intended to provide all Government of Canada departments with some guidance. So it's not a mandatory instrument. It's not a regulation of any sort, but it really is just a tool that's intended. There are a series of tools. In fact, it's not just one, but there are a series of tools that address different types of functions and activities in government that many government departments carry out. Some of the tools are intended to address common functions that you find across most departments. And then there are some tools that look at operationally specific functions and activities in different departments as a way to provide advice about how to consider business value of different types of record, but also very importantly, how to set retention periods. And so just to be clear, in the Government of Canada context, we don't dictate retention periods to departments, but we recognize that there is value in providing advice to different departments about how long they should keep different types of records. And those generic valuation tools are intended to provide consistent advice across all departments around retention periods. But ultimately, it does fall to the department, the deputy head of the department, ultimately, to determine what the various legal and policy requirements are that impact different retention periods for different types of document.
Peter Bevan-Baker.
Thanks, Dara. I appreciate that. The framework, there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, on the scale of what happens in Ottawa is very different from what happens here in Prince Edward Island. But I heard a lot of very familiar challenges and opportunities and concerns. I think even the framework through which this is managed within government is very similar to what happens here. And I'm wondering, at a federal level, there's a couple of questions I have. The first one is regarding your transition to Microsoft 365. Two things. Can you explain the connection, and I didn't get this, between what you referred to as GC Docs and Microsoft 365? And you, I think, mentioned the phrase that you quickly accelerated the implementation of Microsoft 365, and I'm wondering across a federal government how long that transition took, or maybe it's still in process.
So we can provide a little bit of information, and we may follow up with some written information in terms of the adoption of Microsoft 365. We had been looking at Microsoft 365 as part of our kind of ongoing efforts, I think, to improve collaboration and communication across the government. In the context of remote work, when people started working remotely back in March, it was quickly recognized that we needed to be able to have mechanisms basically to improve our ability to work remotely, to work collaboratively remotely, in a fashion that was actually somewhat secure, and that we could manage the information and have those communications in a fashion that was respective of kind of the nature of the information that was being discussed. And as a result, we were able to accelerate how quickly we were able to deploy Microsoft 365 across government departments. Now, this was managed by Shared Services Canada. So they're responsible for that deployment and enabled with Treasury Board Secretariat. And we could provide additional information in respect of that. With respect to the interplay between Microsoft 365 and GC Docs, I'll actually turn over a little bit to my colleague Robert Trottier to provide some additional information around that.
Thank you, Sonya, and thanks for having us today. Basically, as Sonya mentioned in her initial speaking points, the GC Docs is our government-branded version of OpenText Content Server, which is, in fact, a platform, an electronic document and records management system that is used right now widely across the GC to help with the lifecycle management of digital information as well as paper records. Now, the adoption of Microsoft 365, which came as a replacement to the traditional Office suite that we have, also has is built on a SharePoint platform or backend that allows that also has some records management capabilities, and while it supports and facilitates collaboration and document exchange, we have tools like MS Teams we're using today and chat function. It is paramount that we've through our policy refresh, what we're looking at with Microsoft 365 is how do we align the two solutions, or how do we ensure that we have the right level of controls in place to ensure that regardless whether you're using Microsoft 365 or the enterprise EDRMS, GC Docs, that you're still able to do this end-to-end lifecycle management of information. So that's the challenge that we're having right now, and it's part of the IM policy refresh work that we're doing with Pathfinder departments who are the early adopters of this M365 solution. At the end, it's important that we can manage information as a government asset or as a business asset with, and I'm back here to the concept of business value. And regardless of the tools that we're using, we want, as Sonya mentioned, to remove the burden on end users, but ensure we have the system in place to properly manage that digital information.
Thank you, Robert. Peter?
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. You mentioned the phrase early adopters there, and from what Sonya said prior to handing it over to you in answer to that last question, Microsoft, the acceleration of the deployment of MS 365 was as a direct result of COVID and people working remotely. And I'm wondering what sort of time frame well, first the two questions. When did you start the transition to Microsoft 365? And how long are you anticipating that to be fully adopted through government?
If it's all right, I think we'll provide some supplementary information in writing on that question, because we have, I think the repository of that information would actually be with Shared Services Canada.
Okay, sure.
Peter?
We can definitely provide.
Thank you. Peter?
When we are looking at the challenges of modern information management, there are several potential pinch points that along the way, whether it's human resources, technological capability, storage capacity, or something else. And I'm wondering, at a federal level, which of those, or maybe it's another one, which one of those or some other element of information management is causing you the most distress, if I can put it that way, and a place where you're looking for a solution?
I think changes in technology in the move from paper to electronic documents, I think, has really changed the landscape of information management. We've adopted a cloud-first policy within the Government of Canada. Part of what that actually presents is an increasingly large capacity, I guess, for information storage. And so, you know, you have quite elastic capacity in respect of the volume of information and data that you're able to store in that regard. The challenge, of course, becomes the architecture and the organization of that information so that it can be used and reused and found and discovered when it's needed by departments. I think continually the one thing that that information that is critically important within the Government of Canada is not necessarily in terms of the program management cycle, because as most people know, the systems of record for the delivery of services and benefits tend to be very well structured and organized and very deliberate. it's a lot of the other types of information that, and in particular in respect of email information, I think that transition to the use of email and other forms of communication and collaborative vehicles, we want to make sure that we're able to capture and document the decisions that are happening in those regards. Right now, emails and text messages or any other type of communications vehicle are supposed to be captured and then stored in terms of the corporate repository, which requires a proactive action by the individual employee. And I think the challenge for information management is really to make that as easy as possible. So how do we facilitate that to make the right thing, to do the easy thing to do, and to make it less about a proactive action that an employee has to take, but something that actually happens behind the scenes. And so I think that is really where, we need to continue to focus our efforts to make sure that information management really is as easy as possible for employees.
Okay, Peter?
Thanks, Sonia. I appreciate that answer for sure. You mentioned during your presentation that you refer to them as chat messages, but those sort of less formal means of communication, whether that be BlackBerry messaging or text messages, things like that, that they're not necessarily transitory documents depending on the context in which they are used. And I'm wondering what policies exist at a federal level regarding the duty to document when you use those less formal means of communication.
So the duty to document is that we have all forms of all decisions, basically, of business value are documented and stored in the corporate repository. Information of business value, regardless of the form, is required to be moved and saved to the formal corporate repository. So we do have positive guidance out that explains that to employees, and we can provide links to that. It's under the policy on service and digital, as well as additional guidance that has been provided in that regard.
Thanks, Sonia. You have just you just said that this duty to document exists in policy, and I know there is a move in some circles to legislate duty to document. I believe there's at least one province in which that currently exists, and something that we're considering here on Prince Edward Island. Is there any move federally to have the duty to document legislated?
Not that I am aware of at this time. I think we have, and I think there are requirements in the context of the Library and Archives Act, but they do not form necessarily a duty to document business decisions. There are administrative law, I think, policies that impact the requirement to be able to explain and point to decision making. I'm not aware of any legislative initiative at this time.
Okay, Peter, and then I'm going to move to
Sure,
board.
yeah, and this is my final question, Chair. I appreciate your indulgence. You mentioned the access to information, which is something which is growing here considerably. Ours is the equivalent here is the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act, and the number of requests that are coming in on an annual basis here is growing substantially. And I'm wondering what the default position is regarding federal documents. Here, it seems to be getting increasingly difficult to get access to what one might consider should be open and freely available information. Is there two things? Are you seeing a similar trend towards increased requests for information? And is the information that resides in the federal government, is it by default largely open and accessible?
So there were changes made to the Access to Information Act quite recently, actually, which expanded the obligations around proactive publication of information by the Government of Canada. So I don't, at my fingertips, have the full list of documentation that's required to be proactively published by departments and agencies. But for example, this would include things like titles of briefing notes. It includes, support for binders and parliamentary presentations, question period cards, things like that. But we can provide the full list in terms of what's required under the existing Access to Information Act pursuant to changes that came into force actually just in 2019 and this year, over the past year. In respect to requests for under the Access to Information System, I can say that yes, we have experienced an increase in requests significantly over the past number of years. The Government of Canada has moved to create an online request system to facilitate requests. And at the same time, there were changes in respect of the Access to Information Act to reduce fees. So there's just a $5 fee for the request. And in correlation with those changes, we have seen an increase in the number of requests over the past number of years.
Great. Thank you, Sonya. I'll go to Gord McNeely.
Oh, thanks very much, Sonya. I appreciate you taking this time. I guess the Government of Canada moves, and it's quite impressive what you've presented here. What do you do to bring along the departments that maybe fall behind the standard? I mean, there have to be variations amongst departments. What do you do in that case? How do you try to get their information sharing up to standard?
So in respect of the information management practices, we leverage as much as possible the communications and our proactive communications to the community and to departments in respect of the information and guidance that we're able to provide to departments in the administration of their information management to kind of assist them in knowing what the best practices are. We leverage kind of the oversight mechanisms so that we can identify departments who we may need to have conversations with bilaterally through different mechanisms and try to work with them to the extent that is possible to better enable them or better equip them in respect of managing their information.
Great.
Gord McNeely.
Yeah, just to get a little bit on the Microsoft 365, because we've talked a lot about it in this committee, and that seemed like a pretty big pivot for the federal government of Canada. Do you, to include that more, do you foresee more people working from home, and how's that transition going with the protection of information thus far?
So the Government of Canada, I mean, in terms of remote work, I think the guidance has gone out centrally in respect of remote work for the Government of Canada employees. I think that, the direction on that, of course, will align with public health guidance in respect to that direction for remote work. In terms of the rollout, as we were moving towards remote work, I think that we provided guidance in terms of how departments and how employees needed to respect the information management requirements and the security of information in the context of remote work. This included specific guidance in respect of how information was being conveyed. We have, for the majority of employees across the Government of Canada now, they have remote access to the departmental networks, which enable them to use those networks for up to protected B information, which is in accordance with the Government of Canada policy on government security. Microsoft Teams and the M365 suite is also aligned to the protected B capacity. So that means up to a certain level of security. We have that available through our collaboration tools, our official or formal collaboration tools. And
we mentioned before, you mentioned about human resources, and I guess information management, when you're talking about Prince Edward Island, it becomes we want the best information management, and that could cost a lot. You talked about AI or getting these advances with the government of Canada, but have you noticed, or is that a goal of yours to try to do this work more efficiently for the departments? Because it seems like you could spend an infinite amount of money on information management. And do you foresee in the next 2 or 3 years, do you foresee those being like the AI, the blockchain? How is the government of Canada going to be applying those over the next 3 to 4 years?
I think as we go forward with, our review, the ongoing review, really, of our information management policy and requirements, I think, looking at working with departments to look at what are the opportunities there that are presented by technology to improve information management is part of that ongoing work. And so, we work with departments, we work collaboratively with them in respect of what our requirements are. And as part of that, exploring what are the tools that are available to better improve information management. And so, that'll be part of our ongoing work to make that more efficient, but also easy. In many ways, we try, ideally it would be invisible to the majority of employees, that it would happen automatically. They have to be conscious of the security and the requirements around information management, but to make it as easy for them as possible to do it.
Gord?
Yeah, and we've had 6 months to look at government records retention in Prince Edward Island, and we're about to submit a report. Is there anything general that you would recommend from your role that could help us with that report, like general pitfalls that you see on a high-end level that we could consider?
I would say, I think, we provided quite a lot of detail, I guess, in our in the information that I provided earlier. I think, obviously, that provides an overview of our personal experience and the proposals that we put forward at the Government of Canada, as well, the challenges and opportunities. So I don't think I would have anything to add beyond that.
Very much, Sonya.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Sonya, I'm going to ask a couple in here. So one of the challenges that you identified was the documenting of decisions and the storage of information rests with employees, creates an opportunity in which you can look at AI and other tools, but until you get to that point, it's still a challenge because that process still rests with employees. So I'd like to talk a little bit about training and what is the steps that you guys have taken in order to ensure that employees are well trained on what their obligations are?
Certainly. So we have requirements within the policy on service and digital in respect of employee obligations. Also, we have in the directive on the policy on service and digital, and Robert, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but my recollection is that we actually have a requirement in there for managers to make sure that employees are aware. So we do put a positive obligation on departments to ensure that their employees are aware of their information management responsibilities. Is that correct, Robert?
That's absolutely correct, Sonya. And there's also some more formal training that's delivered to employees as well. So in addition of the training, of the information management training that employees receive from their departments, the Canada School of Public Service and the Digital Academy both offer employees a variety of courses to help them understand and meet their information and data obligations. The course varies and includes fundamental of information management in the government, in the context of Government of Canada, access to information and privacy fundamentals, GC Docs fundamentals, privacy in the Government of Canada. There's also a self-directed guide to understanding data. There's a course on big data fundamentals, and also the role of data in the context of digital government. So that's pretty much the formal training that's in place both by the Canada School of Public Service and the Digital Academy. And we also have, as Sonya mentioned in her earlier points, the IM Toolkit, which is a platform we leverage with the analysts centrally to foster communication, collaboration, and to share best practices between departments and from the central agencies to the departments to ensure everybody's keep the pace and have the most recent information available.
Thank you, Robert. And so is there opportunities, or in the policies, do you insist that retraining happens? Because I know during onboarding you are basically taking information through a fire hose. So as you move, start your role and you work with the information, you learn different things. Do you have a secondary course then in which people would use to upgrade or refresh the knowledge that they took initially?
I would say not having it specifically as a policy requirement. I think some of the core objectives of the policy is that having the right the skilled workforce, and that's enshrined in our policy. To achieve that, we're looking at the shift that is required, moving from the old ways of doing things and more of a paper-based, record-centric practitioners that were so much required at a time where we were dealing with miles long of records and paper, to that shift into digital. And that's where the Digital Academy, amongst other things, fills in looking at things like the role of data in digital government and understanding the future of information management in the GC and how we need to upgrade those skill sets from that paradigm shift from a paper-based to a digital mindset. And this is happening throughout various programs offered both by the Digital Academy and also looking at the competency profiles that are required in today's modern workforce.
I don't have any further questions. Does anybody else from the committee have any questions? Okay. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Sonya, Robert, and Dara all for joining us today and taking the time to walk through what the federal government is doing currently, challenges and opportunities, and tools that you're using. I think that the committee will be able to use this information as we move forward, because I think we can all agree that record management is extremely important from our governments, and ensuring that we're using the best practices possible or that are available to us is very important. And I do appreciate you saying, Sonya, at one point during your presentation, that it's not just something you do and it's done. It is something that has to be reviewed on a fairly regular basis to ensure that we are up to date, because things change and they change rapidly. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. I hope that you are all doing well in your places that you live. I assume most are from the Ottawa area or Ontario, and we sympathize with you all and hope that you take care and stay safe and healthy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We'll take just a pause until we reset. All right, hi everyone. We'll resume with the rest of our agenda. So as I mentioned earlier, last meeting we had deferred the agenda items 4 through 6 to today. So I'll just go through the review of the correspondence. So we have sent letters at that time to Minister Compton, Air McGrath Goody, and to Melissa James as follow-ups. And of course, we met with Minister Compton on Friday, so that is resolved. In the correspondence package that we received last week, we received the follow-up information from Air McGrath Goody, which covered off RIM basics, number of FOIP requests that the department had received, and timeline for requests subject to the order that we're looking at. So members were provided that information. And we were also provided correspondence from Brad Mix, in which copies of an email from November 2011 and emails regarding a gap in email records were provided to the committee. So those were all received on Friday. So other than that correspondence, there's nothing new today to discuss. Is there any discussion on this correspondence that we received? Okay, so I will move to review of scheduling. So we do have a final obligation, and that is to complete our report and table that with the Legislative Assembly in this sitting based on our objectives through the creation of the special committee. So we do have time this evening booked to do that. Although if we would like to consider going into camera at this point, if the members are available, we could start that review at this point. So before we make a, well actually, would the members like to do that, or would we like to wait until this evening to do that consideration of the report? Hal?
I am okay with that. I may have to leave this time, but then I may have to leave this evening too, early. So we could get started. It doesn't bother me, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Peter?
Yeah, I'm fine with starting now.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Corey's okay with it? All right, I'm seeing some nodding. So before we do that, let's cover off item number 6, and then we'll have to have a motion to go in camera in order to consider that report. So is there any new business that any members would like to bring up at this time? Okay. And so then I'll ask for a motion for us to go in camera to review the recommendations of the report. Okay.
Review the report.
Gord, okay, so we have a motion from Gord. And do I need a seconder? No. Is everybody in favor of that? Yeah. Great, thank you, everyone. And so I'll adjourn the public part of this meeting, and we will move in camera to consider the report. Thank you.